Good evening, ladies. We have finally made it to our 12th day on our space. The 12th day of Christmas. My true love gave to me 12 drummers drumming. So we have come so far. I've been seeing your pictures posted in the Facebook group, and it just makes me so happy to see how beautiful they are. You've all done just such a beautiful, wonderful job. And so I'm just kind of panning over the whole project, and we're finally going to complete the last space this evening, and then we're going to tie it all together, adding our last little floats and tints and talking about extra things that you might want to add to just pull all these little details together. So in your kit for this, in your packet for this space, we had just a couple of things. You have a little snippet. This is from the American Encyclopedia, and this is from 1873, so a beautiful antique snippet. And also in your kits, you had a little baggie with the embellishments, and these are vintage hooks and eyes, and they're all different. So this one, you can see there's two silver eyes and the black hook. This one happens to have all eyes. So there's just a fun combination of pieces, and everybody's drum is going to look a little bit different depending on what pieces you had in your kit. So we're going to start out by tinting the drum head and the body of the drum. So we're going to use cocoa for the flat surface, the musical surface or the drum head. And I'm just going to use my little filbert brush for this. I'm going to load my brush up in matte medium. And pick up the cocoa. Of course, our matte medium helps our color to go on nicely transparent. The filbert is great for this because it has that nice rounded edge on the toe of the brush, so we can get right in this long oval area that makes up the drum head. And then the body of the drum is going to be tinted with country red. Need one little drop of color. And again, I'm going to pick up matte medium in my brush and just work that color into the matte medium. So we'll end up with a little space here between the surface of the drum and the body because we've got that border that goes around. Okay, so this is what we're going to look like here at this point. I'm going to give this a dry because we're going to put a white dry brush highlight in the center of the drum. So I'm just using a medium dry brush for this. I love the Dynasty 200 series for dry brushing, but you can use whatever your favorite dry brush is. So I'm just going to come in here and pick up that paint, working it into my bristles. And I'm going to scrub off on my paper towel until I have just a nice haze of color. And I'm really twisting that brush between my thumb and my forefinger. And then I'm coming up on the tip because I don't want to have a buildup in the center of the brush hiding out on me. And then when I come to the brush or the surface, I'm going to just use a very light pressure at first to make sure I don't have any blobs. And when I'm satisfied that my brush is really nice and offloaded, then I can start adding pressure on. And we want this highlight to be mainly in the very center of the drum so that it pulls that center forward. And then our shadows play with that. And when we add our darker color on these left and right edges, it really sends the sides back, and it pops this front forward. So when we first apply it, it doesn't look like much on its own because of course it takes our lights and our darks together to give us the shape. So I'm just kind of doing this nice soft bullet highlight so that it's brightest in the center, and then it just slowly fades to the left and the right. And I'm not bringing any of it all the way down these side edges. Okay, I want to just have it just softly fading from the center out. And then I'm going to go ahead and add a little bit in the center of the upper surface also. Okay, nice soft color. From here, we're going to go back to country red, and we're going to just float down the left and right sides of the body of the drum to just strengthen up our red color. Okay, so I'm again loading my brush in matte medium. All the floats are always done with matte medium in the brush, not water. Especially important when we have such old paper like we do with this kit. Okay, so I'm just going to come down my left and right sides, and I'm going to walk this color in towards the center. And really, I want to walk it in as far as I can because I want a nice bright red color to my drum. So I'm going to do it once and then probably twice. Getting my starting right here near the opposite edge, and then just keep stroking it in, stroking it in, stroking it in. You can see that color just pulling on in. So this side really came in far and nicely, and the color is so transparent. Even if you come in, we're not going all the way to the center where we cover up the highlight, but even if you did, that highlight would just glow from underneath. So it's fine if you're able to walk it in that far. It's totally fine. You're not going to hurt anything by doing that because the matte medium keeps us so transparent. I'm going to go ahead and dry this and repeat that one more time. Just reloading in my country red. And again, I'm going to start near the edge. I don't have to come all the way to the edge this time because we started out right on the edge. So the color is probably quite strong there. And we're going to tint that further with soft black. So I'm just going to come over a little bit so that I can carry it into the center more. And this time I did come all the way. The float made it all the way into the middle, but see how nice and bright our highlight is still? Okay, now I'm going to put a little drop of soft black down on my palette. And again, reloading in matte medium, and I'm going to pick up a little bit of soft black. I'm going to size down to a little smaller angular brush. This time I'm going to switch to a 3/8 inch angular. You use whatever you're comfortable with. Okay, and we're going to float into these outer curves on the top surface of the drum. And the same thing, I'm going to pull, pull, pull towards the center so that I get a nice, soft, dark float there. So it's kind of like a C stroke along the edge, and then you're just going to float. You're just going to walk it in. Okay, so we're going to push again, just a little C stroke here so we get that curve dark, and then straight up and down, just pull, 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 pull in towards the center. And I'm not trying to go all the way in because I don't want a dark surface. This is leather or skin, so we want to keep the light color. I just want that darkness next to the band. Okay, and then I'm going to continue with soft black, and I'm going to go down the left and right sides of the body of the drum one more time. So this country red that we put on gave us our color back, and now we want to have our edges rounded. So the soft black is going to push our edges back. So I'm going to come down, and I've got a lot of pressure on my brush, and I'm going to stroke this in just a bit, not walking it in nearly as far as we did the country red, but I do want to walk it in maybe a quarter of an inch or so that it really gives us a nice turn there. And then if you want to mop that out, You can just grab a small mop and you can soften that. You can pull at it a little bit. You could round it out a bit. Okay, so that's what we're after there. Now I'm going to go upside down and do it again on the other side. And I know I tell you this every time, and we've been painting this together for a long while, so you know, but you don't have to worry about those outer edges because we're going to cut the paper out. So what you want to mostly focus on is doing whatever it takes to have a nice soft color there. So if that means pushing beyond your edge, that's totally fine because you'll shape that up when you cut it out. Okay, so lovely. That's exactly what we're after for color there. And then I don't think I gave you burnt umber as a color. Um, and I told you the colors we were going to be using, but we're going to go to burnt umber now. And this is going to be much the same way as we put our other um, colors on. It's going to go on a little sheer at first, and then we'll strengthen it up. So I have a little matte medium in my small round brush. Base coat with a nice stroke all the way around here of burnt umber. And then the bottom band. Again, my focus is on the line where it touches the bottom of the drum. And if I come outside of the lines a bit below that, it's totally fine because we're going to cut it out. So, but I'm going to pick up in my, you can continue with your round brush or you can move to your liner brush. And we're just going to stroke through the band with white for a highlight and then soft black for a shadow. So I'm going to refresh my white puddle. Actually, I think it's still open. Okay, so I want to do this kind of wet and wet. So I'm switching to my liner and I am going to put just a little tiny bit of water in my paint. I have matte medium in my brush, but because I want a little flow, I'm putting just a little bit of water in and I'm just going to refresh this. So I'm going to stroke through with my liner and then I'm going to come into my white, just blend it in a little bit so you can see the color tinting. Again, pick up just a little bit of water so you have some flow. And we're just going to loosely dirty brush that through. And then I'm going to come back to my burnt umber and stroke through it again just to kind of soften the color. I don't want it too glaring here. See how that just blends together? So I've got dark, I've got the light, and then I'm going to go into my soft black and just again continue. I'm just dirty brush blending this. So I want to just stroke a little dark. This is going to go down mostly along this back lower edge to become a shadow next to the surface of the drum. And then I'm going to skip down and go on the lower edge where it touches the drum body. Okay. And then on the bottom band, same thing. I'm going to refresh my color first with a little burnt umber. Come back and pick up a little bit of white in the dirty brush. Just stroke through a little bit. This is just going to stay right in the center because we're looking at this one straight on. So just a little bit of white through the center just to catch a little highlights there. I'm not even cleaning out my brush, going into the soft black and just stroke a little soft black. And then I'm going to go back in with that little angular brush, pick up a little soft black, and I'm going to float against the top and bottom edge of the drum body right up against that trim. Okay, and that's all we're going to do for our drum. That's the main color. Then we have the little accent lines of white. Let me bring back the finished one. So we have the bands that hold the chords, that hold everything together here. So we're going to be using white, and these are extremely thin. We're going to bring straight lines down, and then they're going to Y off because they're going to have to string and attach to the lower band, right? So this is the cording that really pulls everything together. Thin my white down. And you can transfer this on if you want to, or you can just eyeball it. We have one coming down the center, and then we're splitting the space to each side. Let me see if I'm dry enough to do this. I think so. So this is going to be extremely thin, down to about a quarter of the way, then branch off. So it's kind of an upside down Y. And then I'm going to now come and split this space. And then split the other side. Okay, and then we're going to go ahead and cut this out with our detail scissors. I'm just thinning mine down because I went outside of the line. So when I cut it out, I don't want to take all that excess with me. Okay, and then when you come around your band, make sure then you come straight down your side so you get a nice straight side edge there. And then when you position this onto your canvas, you're going to use your line drawing so that you don't lose where the drumsticks are. Okay, so when you place it, use your line drawing to give you proper space here so that your drum is low enough on your space so that the drumsticks fit within your space. And of course, I'm still working in my little book. So let me come on to my space here. And I'm going to position it low enough in the space for my drumsticks. And we're going to go ahead and adhere this down with matte medium. Now, before you adhere it down, once you have your line drawing position, go ahead and transfer your word 12. And that way you won't have to try to transfer that onto wet matte medium, okay? So position my drum. This is going to give me an idea where it's going. And then I'm just going to put a line for the drumsticks. And the shape just comes from the pressure of the brush. So I'm just going to put a line for position. And then because I'm in my book, I'm actually going to move my 12 up and over a little tiny bit. And if you want to just use your own handwriting for this and not transfer the way that I have it, that's fine too, always. Or maybe you want to use a stamp or whatever you want to do there. Okay, so let's go ahead and put our drum on. So we're going to brush matte medium on the back of the paper and on our surface. So I'm just going to grab some matte medium. And get my surface all wet and make sure you've got an area that's a little larger than the paper you're putting down. Okay, when you set it down, you're going to make sure you're straight and centered where you want it before you start pressing anything down. And then use your brush and smooth it down. And then just glide with your fingertip and squeegee that excess medium out. Make sure there's no air trapped underneath there. And I just go right around and rub my edges to seal my edges down, and then smooth the whole thing out with your brush, just like that. Maybe grab your baby wipe and clean your finger off. Okay, so for the drumsticks, we're going to have cocoa and our burnt umber. So I'm just putting a teeny weeny drop of both back down on my palette. And again, I'm going to bring you the finished picture up so you can see that they're pale. This is the cocoa. And we're going to touch the end of the stick, both ends, with soft black. We're going to stroke a little touch of white through the center. That's it, okay? So I'm going to load my round brush in cocoa, and we want the drumsticks to be kind of narrow at the end, a little bit thicker through the middle, and then the end of the stick that hits the drum, of course, is a little roundy. Okay, so I'm going to zoom right in here. So I'm going to start down, I'm going to start up on the tip of my brush, pull just a little, and then I'm going to put pressure, 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 pressure. Then I'm going to lift again and then pressure. Whoop, and I hit a ridge in my paper. So I lost that little, let me just touch this again here. Okay, so let's do it again on this side. I'm going to put my brush down and just pull a little bit with light pressure, add some pressure, and then pick back up and then press back down so that it goes from thin to thick to thin, and then the little, I don't know what you want to call the tip of that drumstick, but it's kind of got like a little head on it to hit the head of the drum. And I'm going to just restroke my other one because I didn't quite get this as thick as I wanted. So let me just thicken this up a little. And I also need to get some paint right down in here where this is the spot where my papers came together. So there's a seam right there. Okay, so while that's wet and without cleaning my brush, I'm just touching the tip of my brush into soft black. You can see it right there. And I'm just going to, actually, I'm going to press and lift on my palette first to soften the color a little bit, and I'm just going to set down a little bit of color on the tip and on the opposite end of the drumstick, just gently pulling. Okay, rinse, get some white, and you can float the white on or just stroke it through. I'm just going to stroke it through mine, just through the center here, so we get a little highlight in the center of those sticks. And this one I want to soften a little bit more. There we go. And then let's zoom out a little so that we can look here. We have a swirl that comes from kind of behind the drum and swirls around here. We have three little comma strokes on the right side of the drum. We have some little dip dots where the lacing connects. And then of course we're going to use tacky glue here on these little embellishments on the hooks and eyes. And I'm going to go ahead and pull these, but what makes the stroke work look so nice here is all the color that we have behind it, which I don't have on mine yet, but I'm going to go ahead and put these on. Now I may have to repeat them once I get some pattern on. Okay, and then I'm going to turn my brush over and just use my brush handle. And then we're going to use tacky glue for our little embellishments. And my tacky glue, you know, my beloved crafter's pick, I'm to the point now where I have to put a skewer down in the inside and scoop some glue out. It's getting pretty thick, but it hasn't dampened my love for it. Okay, so I'm going to use that same little skewer here. So I have 2 hooks and 1 eye. So like I said, some of the kits have 3 eyes. There's just a variety of pieces. So I'm going to put my eye in the center since I have 1 of that piece. And since this glue dries clear, I'm going to go ahead and put down kind of a good amount of it right here. And I want to line this up so that it's centered over that string, the line work string that we painted. And I want to leave a good amount of glue. See how it comes through the holes here? So that's what's going to really hold that on. But the excess that's off to the left and right, I don't need. So I'm going to just use the tip of my skewer to pull that off. You could use a baby wipe or the edge of your paper towel if you have too much glue, but just, it's going to dry clear, but we just don't need extra gloppiness on there. Okay, and then again, I'm going to put a little spot of glue for my other 2 pieces. Again, centering them over the cording here. I mean, if you wanted to be really extra, you could put actual string through these. You could put maybe beads on the bottom where we put the dip dots and then thread string through and actually lace these hooks. Wouldn't that look really cool? I thought about that, but I thought it might be pushing our luck just a wee bit too much. Okay, so there's our fun accent on our drums. Love that. And then as long as you don't have damp matte medium on your surface, you can go ahead and letter your word 12. And this is not calligraphy, just printed block letters. And there's space number 12. Okay, so I'm going to zoom out here and let's just talk about how do we pull this all together now. Okay, so I'm going to just clean up my space a little bit here. I'm going to give you another look at this just in case you need it before I set this aside. And then I'm going to bring back up the finished one. So what we have been doing when we finish a space, I'll often say to you, look at the spaces that it falls next to so that, for example, space number 4 has cocoa or raw sienna that was floated on the lower edge. So when I got to space 6, I did a float of white across the upper edge so that I had a dark and a light together, right? So now you're just going to start right at your first square. And that's the first thing that you're going to do is make sure that you've got good definition between all of your spaces. And if you need to add darks or lights, go ahead and do that first. So you can see a lot of really sheer tannish, brownish colors here. So I did cocoa, I did raw sienna, and I did a lot of this in the beginning when we separated our spaces, and I think you did too. So if you need to strengthen any of those, you can do that. Then check your contrast between squares. So for example, space number 8, you can see this white highlight here, and that's because I had dark in this space. Space number 12, I brought white down the bottom of 8 and put dark at the top of 12. So what a lot of the dark is that you're seeing, when we did space 6, we used that navy, and we had only used that a few times in the project. And so to carry that color and give us dark edges, I did a lot of just random tinting with the navy down my edges. I used it for a shading separating color, so you can see it here on number 12. You can see it across the bottom of space number 10. You can see it down here in the corner of 9, up here on the edge of 5. Okay, I just kind of did it with a finger drag here at 2. I brought some down 3. So just any place you need a dark, you can add that as your dark. Any place that you want to have anything brought out a little bit more, for example, around this music is soft black. Um, we did soft black in our center. I tinted a little, see that navy again? I brought a little tint of navy here to bring the navy through. So these are all things that are going to, it's going to vary depending on what your colors look like at this point. Any color that we've used, you can just randomly do a little sheer tint of. So we have all that beautiful aloe that we used in the very beginning. And so I added some greens here and there, just a little sheer wash. I did some over here. You can see some up here in this square. You can see some, um, let's see, up across here. Whoops, by getting the camera, there's a little bit of greens up here. Okay. So that's our separation of our spaces. And then a really fun thing is to come back to your go all the way back to the beginning when we put our pattern on. And now that we have all of our details on, if you want to run some of these patterns together, so for example, I can clearly see bubble wrap here. So I could take bubble wrap and I could bring bubble wrap in some of the space below in number 6. Just, you know how you can tap it with a fingertip? So I could bring that down here. And what it does is pulls a bottom layer up to a top layer. So you can fill any place you have space, okay? So I have, some empty space here. I also have diamond. So I could bring my diamond stencil up and do diamond, 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 and so pull it here so it crosses the shading, and now it becomes a tippy top level. Um, Besides the pattern, another thing that you can do is use that stencil, the diamond or the little dots, and you can put texture paste through here and there and cross squares. And so, like, I've got some open space here and no pattern, and I have some space here. So I could take that little fine dot and I could use tinted texture paste and go right in this area, maybe in this area, here and there, to again add that a final layer that crosses wherever you can get spaces to cross one another. It adds so much interest. Like when we did 10 and 11 and the trumpet pulls up here, you could do swirls that cross one another. Okay. This is a good example of the pattern crossing spaces. So the pattern here, and then there's pattern here that comes underneath there. Um, I think that's really all. I think that's really all that I have really to tell you. You There's never an end to what you could do. This is the end of what I did do. If you have any, you could look through your scraps for any words that might say something special or say something kind of witty. If you wanted to add extra things, and you can add those on. Um, in my original drum here, I have the word musical that just happens to be here. So in that music magazine, you could look for musical words and you could add them like I did on my milkmaid in my book. You could look for, you have that farmer's wife page. So if you have the word milk or anything that pertains to dairy or anything like that, you could add it. It's the fun at the end of all any little extras that you want to, any numbers you have, page numbers or dictionary entry numbers, you can just sneak them in. So if you had a random 2, you could, sneak it on one of your doves or in the side of a heart. um I don't know, you show me what you can come up with. This is, like I said, this is the end of what I did, but there's no end to what you could do. So here's another look at space 12. Here's another look at the whole thing. And I just thank you ladies so much for the fun of getting together for this project. I thank you for your patience when life just took a couple of unexpected turns for us, um, and just sticking it out, and your grace with it. And I hope this becomes something cherished. If you're keeping it for yourself, if you're giving it for a gift, I hope it becomes a cherished part of your holiday tradition, because there's just so much to cherish in it. But your time and your talents in it, and all the treasures that are just tucked away in it. So it's a very special piece, and I hope it will be special to you for the future. So, again, thank you so much for your time that you put into it. Thank you for all the fun that we had working on it. And if anybody has any questions, post in the group. If you want to get together for a finish day, again, I'm very happy to do that. We could do a Zoom, um, or we could try even in our Facebook group. So just don't be afraid to post or send me a message if you want a hand or want to get together time. I'm all for it. Thank you so much, ladies, and I look forward to getting creative with you in the new year also. Bye.